Hi guys, welcome back to the Art of Server. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to swap the backplane of a Supermicro 826. This is my Supermicro 826, which is a 12 bay chassis with 3.5-inch bays. The backplane on this chassis looks like this. And I've already got one in there, but I'm going to show you how to swap another one into this chassis in case you ever need to do that. And there are a couple of different reasons you might want to do that, because maybe you want a different type of backplane, because there's at least 3 different types of backplanes that you can get for this type of chassis. Now before we get into that, do me a favor and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you're into building servers, especially with Supermicro hardware, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss one of my videos. Alright, so let's go over the tools that we're going to need before we get started. So I have these channel lock pliers, and this is channel lock 748. These I use for pulling electrical plugs. And I originally got these for automotive work, but I find that they're actually really helpful for computer stuff as well. And having one of these just makes it a lot easier to pull some of the plugs on that backplane, especially in these tight, narrow spaces. And all the screws are Phillips head screws, so you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. This is a Japanese brand called Vessel. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. I love these tools. I'm a tool guy, so I don't know if you've seen my previous videos. I usually have, a variety of tools, and these are one of my favorite screwdrivers. The Japanese Phillips head is a little bit different than the typical American Phillips head, and they tend not to slip out, so I kind of like that. This is also a little bit longer shaft, and that's going to be really helpful because this is also a magnetic shaft, and if you ever drop any screws, which is probably going to happen today as we're doing this, you'll be able to put that down in there and pick up those screws that fell to the bottom of the chassis. So that's always useful to have a magnetic shaft and somewhat longer one. You don't need something super long, but something a little bit longer does help. Now there are some screws in here where it's going to be a little hard to get a long shaft into, or any really screwdriver into to reach those screws. And so for those situations, I have a Phillips number 2 drive bit on a 1/4-inch drive ratchet system. And I have this little tiny mini extension, and it's not so much the extension I want, but actually this head here is a flexible, I don't know what you call it necessarily. It's not a union joint, but basically it allows you to have a little bit of twist to this bit, so it makes it a little bit easier to reach into those tight spots. So this is just a 1/4-inch gear wrench ratchet. You don't need anything really fancy, and really you don't need to apply a lot of torque to this, but having something like this will help get to some of those other screws that are a little bit hard to get to. Alright, so before we start taking the backplane out, first thing you want to do is make sure all your drive bays are empty, because you don't want anything connected to that backplane when you're trying to remove it. And I've already got most of the drives out, but there's one more here, so I'll take this out and put this away. So make sure all your drive bays are empty, and then we'll go to the next step here to take that backplane out. Alright, so one of the first things you want to do, let me just put the backplane we're putting in aside here. But one of the first things you want to do is give yourself some clearance, so I recommend taking out these fans. The spot behind the backplane is pretty narrow, so anytime you can gain a little bit of clearance is helpful. So I'll put the fans over here. And first thing we want to do after that, now that you have some clearance, is we're going to unplug the power connectors to the backplane. So let me adjust the camera so you get a better view of that. Okay, so hopefully this gives you guys a better view of what's going on back here. So there's a bunch of power cables that are coming out of the power distribution of the chassis. And there are, let me fold this back, hopefully you guys can see it. There are 3 Molex connectors back here that power the backplane. So we got to get into those and pull those out. So that's where, oops, that's where this channel lock plier comes in really handy. So you basically just go in down here grab one of these things. I'll try to hold this back so you have some view of that. And I just press it up against the frame of the backplane. Wiggle it a little bit, comes right out. So if you ever tried doing that with just your fingertips, you'll know how much I appreciate these pliers. All right, so let's keep going. Wiggle a little bit and it comes right out. The other thing that's really nice is that with the pliers, when you have a good grip on that connector, you can really kind of just manipulate it in whatever direction you need. All right, so there's one last one that's back here. All right, so hopefully this gives you a better view of what's going on here. There's that connector right back here, and I'm going to grab it with the pliers. All right, and then I'm just going to wiggle it, and there we go. So now it's out. All right, so now that we've disconnected all the power, we can start removing some of the screws. All right, so there's a total of 7 screws that hold this backplane in place. There are 3, here I'll point down. There's 3 on the bottom, 1, 2, and then there's a third one down by the power plugs here. I'll show you that in a little bit when we take that out. And then there are 4 across the top, which are right here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's all the screws that need to be removed. Now I do recommend that you remove them in a particular order. And as far as taking them off, it doesn't matter too much, but when you're putting the backplane back in, the order does help get things aligned right, because the screw holes and stuff like that are not perfectly aligned, and you want to leave yourself some flexibility. So we're going to start with removing the 3 screws on the bottom. All right, so we'll start with the screw back here. All right, 1 screw down. Our next screw is down here. All right, and the last screw on the bottom is down over here. All right, so this is where having a magnetic shaft is really helpful. As you can see, losing something down there is going to be quite difficult to get out, and this way you can get your screws out easily. All right, so what remains are the 4 screws on top, and we'll start with this one first. This is where having that ratchet screwdriver really helps to get into the spot, because as you can see, there's a fan wall here, and it's not easy to get a long screwdriver in this spot. So I like to go in at an angle with this, like that, and then I can start ratcheting this off. Okay, so as I had anticipated, I'm dropping some screws here. So again, magnetic shaft comes to the rescue for that. Now the top screws are different than the screws that were on the bottom, so I would keep those separated. They're, let's see if I can show you. All right, so these are the 2 different types of screws. There's a long one that's a little bit longer, and then there's a shorter one. The shorter ones go to the bottom, and the longer ones are for the top. And the ones for the top need to be longer because it has to go through this very thick PCB and into the threads on the back here. So that's why you want to keep those screws separated. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3 more of those screws. And I'm just going to go ahead and just remove those. All right, so at this point we've got all the screws removed, but there's a cable that I want to remove before we start trying to take the backplane out. And that's this cable back here. This is basically the front I/O cable to the power button and indicator LEDs and that type of stuff. It's caught between the two SAS cables that go into the backplane, so I want to remove that to get that out of the way, because we're not going to be able to remove the SAS cables with the backplane installed. So we're actually going to have to pull the backplane out with the SAS cables intact and then pull them out once the backplane is out. So I got to give some clearance to that. So I'm going to pull this cable out and kind of fold it out of the way a little bit back here, hopefully. All right, so now we have some clearance to pull the backplane out with the SAS cables attached to the backplane. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just pull this backplane out. Now, it is a little bit tricky to get the backplane out because you got these loose cables that might be getting in the way and stuff like that. So you want to try to fold them out of the way a little bit. And there are grooves on the side here, or little channels on the side of the chassis. All right, let's see if I can just get these power cables out of the way. They're kind of a pain in the butt. All right, so we are going to lift up a little bit. So the key is you want to lift up just a little bit and then slide it towards the back like that. All right, so because there's little channels on the side, on the inside of the chassis that the board is in, and so this is where it's fully seated down. But yeah, basically you want to lift it just a little bit and then slide it towards the back and then keep lifting it up. Now along the way, you're going to feel some resistance. So like right now, I think I'm feeling some resistance. So a couple of things you want to make sure you have some clearance. There's these SAS connectors on the front of the backplane, and there are these pieces of sheet metal that are part of the drive bays. You don't want those to get caught with each other, so make sure you have that's the reason for pushing the backplane towards the back, is to clear these SAS connectors from hitting the sheet metal that's part of the drive bays. Right now, I think I'm feeling some resistance back here because the SAS cables are still intact, and they're hitting that connector from that cable I pulled off earlier. So I'm just going to pull the SAS cables a little bit out of the way from that connector. Just going to pull that. All right, there we go. All right, so now we have the backplane out of the chassis, and this is where you can then release these SAS cables. All right, and one more. All right, there we go. All right, so now we've got the backplane that was in there out. We're going to go ahead and replace this with the other backplane that I had. All right, so here's the backplane I'm putting back in. It's the same backplane in this case. I was just doing this because I was testing some backplanes out. But this video may be helpful for people who have a different backplane. They want to switch to, say, like a expander backplane instead of a direct attach backplane, or vice versa. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and attach the SAS cables first. All right, so I have the SAS cables attached, and now I'm just going to lower this backplane down into the chassis. Yeah, it sucks when all these cables tend to get in the way of things. see if I have a way to deal with that a little bit better here. All right, let's try lowering this. All right, so back here again, these cables are getting in the way of that connector from the front I/O panel. All right. Okay, so that looks like it's down there. Right. Okay, so earlier I said one of the things you want to make note of when you're installing is the order that you put the screws in, because if you, so in my experience at least, if you put the screws on the bottom of the backplane in first, it becomes really difficult to put the screws on the top in, because the threads and the hole are not always perfectly aligned. And so you can see this metal, this sheet metal here can move, has some movement. And usually if you put the screws down on the bottom, even if they're just loose, so you don't, like, you put the screws, you know, slightly in but not fully tightened down, even that somehow makes it really hard to get the screws on top in. So I recommend putting the screws, thread the screws on the top first before you do anything on the bottom. So again, I'm going to use this bit to drive the screw. All right, so I've threaded this in, and I can already see, like, if I move the backplane back a little bit, I can already see that the screw is not aligned with the threaded hole. And if you've seen some of my other Supermicro videos showing you how to do these backplanes, it's kind of universal. This is a pain point with all the Supermicro chassis. So I'm just kind of using my finger to bend the sheet metal just a little bit to see if I can get that aligned. All right, looks like I got it aligned. All right, I'm not going to go all the way down and actually leave it a little bit loose, because the alignment for the other holes are going to be equally, or usually are equally as difficult. Yeah, this one. So again, I'm just holding, kind of applying some pressure to the sheet metal to get it aligned. So okay, that looks like it got in. They come out easy enough. Going back in is kind of a pain. All right, that one went in. And this one, I'm going to put a little attachment to give me a little bit more grip. All right, so same thing. All right, got that down, and now I'm just going to tighten them a little bit. Okay, so now we're gonna put the screws on the bottom last, and then we'll connect all the cables together. And again, just as a reminder, the screws that go on the bottom are the short ones. All right, one final screw, and that's the one down there. Hopefully you can see that. All right, now we just got to connect the cables. All right, I'll start with the front I/O panel cable. And so this connector is keyed. There's a notch on one side, so it only goes in one way. And then I'll kind of put this out of the way down here. All right, now let's get to the power cables. All right, so we're going to start with this Molex cable all the way in the back here. And again, this is where these channel lock pliers are really going to be helpful, because you can basically grip the connector and you can pretty much manipulate it in any way you want here. So let me just get the other cables out of the way. All right, so that's in there now. And I'll then just grab the rear and use my other hand to kind of press that in. There we go. All right, let's get this other Molex connector. Again, I'm going to grab it with these pliers. Then I can just manipulate it right in there. And I'll grab the back. There we go. All right, and we got one more. And there we go. All right, guys, so finally we can put the fans back down. And that's pretty much it. We are done swapping out the backplane of a Supermicro 826. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Hopefully this will help anybody who needs to swap a Supermicro 826 backplane. And if you found this video informative and helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you are into building servers and that sort of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. Also, if you'd like to support my channel, go check out my eBay store. I've got the greatest selection of pre-flashed HBA IT mode SAS controllers for your ZFS, Unraid, or TrueNAS builds. So go check out the link down in the video description below. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.